Hello, everybody, and welcome to KindWorks, KindSoups. We cook soups together every Monday from 5:30 to 6:30. I'm Deb Lang. I'm the executive director, and we have guest chefs from all parts of KindWorks that lead our soup sessions. We're glad that you're here today. We're cooking with Carol and Susan Weil today. We cooked with them just about a year ago and honored their mom after she had passed away by cooking her favorite soup, which my brother told me 3 days ago has been his favorite soup that we've cooked in the last year and a half. So he's hoping we do it again, but I promised him that this one in Marianne's honor will also be a complete winner. Because what we've learned about Marianne last year was so much fun and so warm and inspiring. I know that this soup that Carol and Susan picked out to make with us today to honor her will also be a complete winner. And I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour with all of you and with Carol and Susan and some of their kids and some of their mom's friends. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Carol. I don't know if Susan's on yet, but as soon as she comes on, I'll add her.
Thank you. Thanks, Deb. This is such an honor and a privilege to be doing this with all of you. We lost my mom about a little over a year ago, as Deb said, and given the situation with COVID and my mom had not wanted any sort of funeral service, it was really a challenge to try to figure out how we could deal with our emotions and best respect her memory. And doing a KindSoups was just so perfect because my mother, above all, loved family and loved food. And so being able to host in her memory was just very meaningful and cathartic for our family. And so to be able to do it on this 1 year anniversary again is really an honor. And so my husband, David, who loved my mother deeply, is here and just wanted to say a word or two too.
Yes, and honoring Marianne by cooking is the highest praise for her because she was a master chef. First of all, she could have 20 people over for dinner and start cooking at 5 o'clock and be completely ready for a multi-course meal. But she was game to try anything. She loved eating too. I think I've mentioned that toward the end of her sickness, we got takeout from a deli with a corned beef sandwich and latkes. She was in heaven. And so food is really a great tribute to Marianne.
That's lovely.
Thank you.
And I saw Julia sign on.
Oh, awesome. That's great. For those of you cooking, and Julie, I want to give you a chance to say a word. I just want to say, throw your oil in if you haven't already, and we can warm that up so we can begin the soup. And Julie, I know you're in the middle of your workday. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there something you would like to say about Grandma? Any memories you have? We'd love to hear them.
You know, I'm not seeing Julia now. I'm seeing Marissa. So Marissa's.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, that was me. That was all me.
Marissa,
yes. Just happy to be here.
Hi, Marissa.
So, yeah, and I think Marissa's actually doing soup with us. So she is going to stay on for the soup. And I have to say, she actually contacted me a couple days ago and said, is it okay if I do this with lentils? Because I'm not sure I can get the split peas on time. And I said, you know, that is such a perfect segue for Grandma, because my mother was not only a fabulous cook and loved to eat and share food, but she was also really flexible and really good about making substitutions in the kitchen and in other roads of life. So I think that's just pretty perfect that Marissa's doing lentil split pea soup today.
It's such a gift to be like your mom was, where, you know, you just look at what's in front of you and you make it work, whether it's a decision in life or in soup or in whatever else, right? You just kind of don't get too stuck in your expectations, but figure out a way to make it work. I love that.
Absolutely. And we have a question in the chat about how much oil to add. And I would just say, depending on what size pot you're using, like lightly coat the bottom of your pot. I don't know if you can see inside my pot, I have a really large one, and I just put a layer that covers the entire bottom, because you don't want stuff to burn. It doesn't have to be too much thicker than that, but the leek will take in some of the oil. So make sure that you have enough there so that stuff doesn't burn. And you can always, if you feel like things are starting to singe, just add a little more oil, is the way I would do it.
And Susan Weil, hi.
Yay.
You're muted, but we want to hear from you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hi, so this is my sister Susan, and she's joining us from Philadelphia today. And I think she actually is going to be doing 2 different versions of the soup, again on the theme of Marianne's always being so flexible and accommodating to substitutions. And Susan, do you want to talk a little bit about because the only recipe people have seen is the vegetarian one that we have on the website, but maybe you want to talk a bit about what you're going to be making.
Well, it's just that I'm married to a carnivore, so he will not go for peas and dill. So I am making a half of each recipe. The one I usually make him is on the back of the split pea package from Goya. And I just put I just follow that. So I'm making one of those, and then I'm also making the dill with the peas that Carol put on, and I'm going to be donating that to a friend whose husband is very ill right now, and she has a large family that's staying with her. So I'm bringing her the soup tomorrow, and thought for younger people, the vegan option is probably the best. So I will have the best of both worlds.
Awesome.
Also a Marianne trait.
Oh yeah, my mother would always know what anybody's food, before it got to be popular to ask about food allergies or preferences. My mother always made for her cousin Ed Berzer a sugar-free dessert because he was a diabetic. And as people got to be gluten conscious, she would make gluten-free things for her friends who needed that. And she would always have a kosher option for friends that needed that. So it's not unusual at all to be doing like 3 different versions of the same recipe. That's typical my mother.
And she would also remember who had which allergies. So she could have 3 different couples over and remember, that she had to like have low sugar options for one, and no cholesterol for someone else, and no gluten for someone else. And it never phased her or threw her. She was always so capable of meeting everybody's needs. And she loved to meet people's needs through food. So if that meant doing 3 different recipes, that was never a problem.
Wow. Carol,
hi, Mom.
is on. Whoop. Hi, Julia.
Yay. Hi, Mom. Hi, Julia. Thank you for joining. It's so nice to have you. Do you have any special memory of Grandma you want to share?
Oh,
I didn't need to put you on the spot.
We'll be cooking for a while.
We'll be cooking for a while. So if something prompts you, I can't tell because of the view that I have. I can't tell sort of when anyone has something they want to say, or so you can send something in the chat if you want to raise your hand or whatever, or just let Deb know. And
okay.
Hey, Aunt Carol, Nikki and I are on too.
Yay! Hey, Jen. These are my nieces, Susan's daughters, Jen and Nicole. We have a real matriarch in the Weil family, so you won't see any little boys, but you'll see lots of girls.
We pin them too. Let me see. Oh, here's Nicole. Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Yay! So it's so nice, and this would mean so much to my mom. She loved family. She loved food. Really, those were 2 of the really her 2 most important things in life, I think. So it's great to be able to combine them in her memory. So if you have not yet done so, go ahead and add your leek and the bay leaves. And one thing I wanted to say about the bay leaves, I find that they break. And so if you don't worry if you don't have full bay leaves. I'm trying to show some of mine are little pieces. That's okay. Just be careful you get them out eventually after they've cooked a bit, because they're really tough and not fun to bite into. So you just want to use them to flavor the leek. And then when they've done that job, you want to remove them. So I'm getting a nice sizzle now. I hope you're all sort of at that point where the leek are beginning to sizzle. And I'm not quite ready to add my peas yet. And by the way, for those of you, if you didn't get a chance to completely thaw your peas, not a problem. It'll just get maybe a little bit more watery before you add the broth. So you may want to, adjust your broth accordingly. But it's not, if you add them frozen, they'll still do what they need to do. When I wanted to make a comment about the dill, I know fresh dill can sometimes be hard to find. My hat is off to those of you who grow it. I cannot grow dill. It just doesn't like me, I think. It never seems to want to do those beautiful frothy sheets that you can buy in the store. So I was, and it can sometimes be hard to find. If you were not able to find it, you can use, the dill in the spice cabinet. It's not going to be quite as flavorful, but once again, do what you need to. And Deb, I just want to ask, is there a Joan son who has joined my mom?
Yes.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Joan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I did want to mention you and honor you and tell everyone I'm so grateful that you're here. Joan is one of my mother's dearest friends, and she lives in Los Angeles where my mom lived, and is joining us today. And Joan, if there's anything you'd like to say about mommy or your memories, please feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself. And I'm just so glad you're here.
Oh, Joan, you have to press unmute.
Okay, that
Oh,
better?
good. Welcome.
Hi,
Hi.
you look great.
Oh, thank you.
It's so good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been a long time. Yeah, what can I say? I knew your grandmother first. And she was a good friend of my sister's, and I ended up in the same school as your grandmother, who was a librarian in the junior high school that I started teaching at when I just got out of City College in New York. And she would come to my rescue. She would check on me almost every day. And she would look in the window because the doors had glass, and she'd signal me, did I need her help? Because I had no experience teaching. I just came out of college. I had no education classes, nothing. I was just doing it, what I knew to do by the seat of my pants. And she would always come in when the classes got unruly, and she'd say, okay, we're going to the library. Everybody get, so she would march us all in. And then when I was moving to Los Angeles, she said, well, you've got to meet my daughter. And so that's how I met your mom. And she was so helpful and wonderful because I had just been recently married and was having a baby, Ari, whom you knew as a baby. And I don't know how many people know that wonderful story about your mom, Susie, when you didn't know that you wanted to go to school, you weren't going to go to college or something, you just wanted to have a baby. So she borrowed my son for the weekend, for overnight, for you to take care of. So you could see what it was like to be with a baby 24/7.
Yeah.
I have to say, I actually remember that because I was even younger, and I just remember looking at my mother saying, why do we have this crying child in our house?
Well, I remember it well. It was the weekend, and I loved Ari. I used to babysit for you at
That's
night on the weekends, And she thought, and I loved him so much, I just wanted one just like him. And so my mother had this idea that you should go away for a weekend.
Yeah,
And
she always wanted to tell Tom and I, we needed to get away. We were always with him. We never went away. And
Right.
so that was like one of the first times that we did.
And I remember she loved to tell that by Sunday morning, I had given her back Ari and I was going out with my friends. I
Right.
lasted until Sunday morning, she said, and then I knew you would go to college. So
Right.
you Joan, because I did go to college.
That's right. So that was that, but we had some wonderful times together and talks, and we saw each other quite a bit. And she did love to cook, and she became Tom's dental patient, and
And my dental patient.
yeah.
I was his dental
Tom
patient.
was all of our dentists, right?
Yes,
And speaking,
yes.
speaking of Tom, I do want to say Tom is going through a really hard time right now. He's quite sick, and we send healing love and thoughts and prayers, Joan, to you and to the whole family and to Tom. And I
Thank
know,
you.
I want to say to the group, if you have any thoughts of people to say an extra prayer for, say a prayer for Tom tonight, please.
Thank you. That's really very
A
touching.
wonderful, wonderful family friend.
Thank you. Yeah, we went many years together, and I miss both your grandmother and your mother, and I think about them, and they always make me smile, because we just, I don't know how. I mean, you remember your grandmother too, and she was quite lively,
Yes.
and
She was.
tremendous energy. And when I knew her, this was in the early 60s, so she was still working as a librarian, and we would go to Schraff's. She loved Schraff's.
Love Schraff's.
Right. So
Hamburger and coffee.
we'd always meet at Schraff's, and so we'd have that time together, or go to Saks to buy gloves, because she loved gloves also. That was her thing.
So did my mom. My mom was probably the only woman in Los Angeles who wore gloves when it was anything under 70 degrees.
Well, that's from her mother, because her mother, she loved gloves. And as soon as the sale came in Saks, she would say, let's go to Saks and get some gloves. So, very fond memories. And of you too, when you were little. So
Yeah.
cute.
We did white gloves. So where
I
did you-
remember when Tom went to, I think, Carol, it was for you. And went and talked about China or something in your school
Oh, that certainly sounds possible. Yeah.
when you were at Westlake. Yeah.
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 Okay, so gang, I just want to interject. You should probably be getting ready to add your split peas now. The packaged pea, the dry peas. And you can add, just keep them in for maybe 30 seconds or a minute, because you don't want them to burn before you add the broth.
Carol, can I ask, was this a favorite recipe of your mom's, the split pea soup?
So, well, my mother loved pea soup, definitely. This one, because again, my mother was not a vegetarian, and the recipe I remember her making all the years I was growing up involved a ham hock, which clearly I was not about to embark on. So I found this one, and I do remember actually shortly after I became a vegetarian, I was always sending her recipes, and she, sort of was a bit hesitant at the beginning to try all of these newfangled vegetarian things, but she got really intrepid after a while, and then she even would start to send me vegetarian ones. Oh, I saw this, in the New York Times, and I thought it looked really interesting. So I do remember sending her this one. It's a kind of a makeup of an Ina Garten one that actually originally used chicken broth, but I just substituted veggie broth. And I loved the idea of the frozen peas in it. I thought that was really kind of a nice touch. So I remember her making it for one of her various parties. My mother always loved to entertain, and she always had people to her home. And so she was like, oh, I'll make this one for this Saturday night when I have so-and-so and so-and-so over. And she did like it. So that was part of why I felt comfortable having this be the recipe, because I remembered that she had made it. She probably made it with the chicken broth, but that she had liked it. So that's the story here. I'm also a huge Ina Garten fan. I think.
Oh, I love,
has
yeah,
Really, yeah.
my
Just some
favorite.
fun stuff. Yeah. And very accessible. They're not like, like Otto Lengi, who's another chef that I just adore, but his stuff is always, you have to go to 5 different stores to find the right spices. And that's not the case with Ina Garten. So
No,
makes it easy.
it's casual elegance.
Casual, there you go. Casual elegance. Okay, well, I am getting a nice little sort of simmering boil, a little slow boil, I guess you would say, to my soup here. I don't know what yours looks like, but I have the leek and the bay. I've taken out my bay leaves now. So if you haven't done that, you can go ahead and do that. And I have the peas and most of the broth. I'm just sort of adding the broth. The recipe doesn't say to do this, but I like to add it bit by bit because it warms up that way a little more slowly. And so can you see? I never can tell.
Yep, we can see.
Yeah, that it's just sort of bubbling along peacefully and happily.
Yep. Such
As
a
grandma
good
did.
Carol, I'm surprised you took the bay leaves out so early.
Yeah, the only reason is you could leave them in longer. I'm afraid I won't see them, and as they get softer, they're harder to see.
Okay.
And I think the flavor imparts pretty quickly, but you're right, you can totally leave them in longer. You
Well,
really
no.
just need.
Yeah, I just wanted to learn from you if really, when I leave it in, for the whole hour or whatever, I'm cooking my soup, is that overkill because the flavor comes out pretty quickly?
No, I don't think it's overkill. And I did leave in like the big ones that are whole leaves because I figured I could see those. I just took out the little pieces because I was afraid they'd get lost in the shuffle.
Can I ask a question about the dill? Because here's my dill. But should I chop it up really fine? I didn't know whether it matters since you're gonna puree it anyway.
Yeah, I have mine like this because so it's not super fine, but it's just
You always have to take the big stems
you have to
off.
take the big stems out,
But the
right?
little stems are not a problem to eat, right?
I don't think so. And especially if you're going to puree it, because it's going to they'll get soft in the cooking. So I think the little stems are fine. It's the big pieces, like the stalks that you want to. So. And the peas are going to take a while to soften. So this is a good soup for schmoozing because once everything's in, you sort of just can sit there for a while.
So I have a confession to make, and it starts with feeling like now every time I have to do a mise en place, or else Olivier will be very critical of my technique. So I rinsed the peas earlier and then put them in a bowl, and it was like a mass, a solid mass of split peas. So I'm kind of like hacking away at them, and hopefully now that they're in boiling water, they will like
They'll be fine.
loosen up. But lesson learned: don't
Don't worry, I
over-prepare.
did the same. Exact
That
same.
totally happened to me too, Betsy.
That's so funny. I'm gonna go
Thank you,
quickly
Denise.
run through and make sure that Olivier's not on. We'll have to get the static going that problem with the connection.
I'll change my online name.
That's a good idea. Good idea.
So
Oh, go ahead.
this has been really great. We've really been enjoying this. I actually have all my girls in the kitchen with me. I have 2 of them baking a cake, and my daughter doing this with me for her mitzvah project. We're just starting. It's our first time. It says transfer a few cups of solid, return to the blender, add the petite peas. So the frozen peas you blend before you cook them?
No. You can just add the petite peas when eventually it's all going to get pureed.
Okay, but do you cook them first in the pot or you just puree it?
No, you can let them cook for a little bit. I haven't added mine yet because I think the dry peas take so long to soften, and I just wanted to make sure they were on their way to softening.
Okay.
So I just, plus my peas are still thawing a little bit, so I'm just letting them sit here. I don't think there's any magic. You could add them right away. It'll just make them get a lot softer.
So then eventually puree the whole soup eventually.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then now there are different schools of thought too about how pureed you want your soup to be. I actually like it with a little bit of texture and you know, sort of grit to it. And so, but if you want a perfectly smooth soup, like a vichyssoise or something like that, then just, you know, puree the hell out of it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
When I read the recipe, it made it sound actually like you just took 2 cups of the broth and then you pureed the solids. And then you added that back to the original pot. Did I read that wrong?
No, I think, well, let's see, what I have is remove from the heat, transfer a few cups of soup and solids to the blender, add the petite peas, puree until smooth, return puree to soup. So, yeah, so I guess you could, I guess what she's doing is not pureeing the whole thing. That's right. But she's pureeing it with all the ingredients in. Return puree to soup. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how much solid you can get out.
You want, right. I mean, another option would be to just puree it with the dry stuff and then add the split peas all, you know, you could do it that way too. I like it chunky, so I will probably, and I use an immersion blender. So there I'll just do it until it still looks chunky enough and stop. But the taking it out and putting it in is kind of, that'll be good if you have a standing blender. But if you want to use an immersion blender, just eyeball it, you know. If anyone, because this is a sort of a special kind soup about a mom, a beloved mom. If anyone has a beloved mom story they would like to share, we are very open to hearing that. My mother always loved hearing about other moms. So feel free. I know we all have moms. We all have wonderful memories and stories. So please feel free to unmute and share.
I'll share. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my mother's passing as well. Well, I don't know if tomorrow is the anniversary of your mom's passing. Is it tomorrow? Or is it already
No,
passed?
it was actually in February,
Okay.
but this was just sort of a date that worked for all of us.
That's good. I'm actually glad because I'm really I'm channeling all this to myself since tomorrow is her anniversary.
Good.
And she was that kind of mom too, like you're describing, really wonderful. She didn't really like to cook much, honestly, but she was really wonderful in every way. And so I really feel connected with this tonight because of that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much
Be
for
thinking
sharing.
of you tomorrow, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this is a great way to, to keep your mom with you. And I know that she is in your mind and heart also, but I think for my mom too, who passed away in 2003, I still always make her chicken soup and the same exact way. And sometimes people will say, oh, but if you add this and you add this, I say, absolutely not, it's this basic chicken, onion, carrot, and celery, period. I don't want anything else in it and to take away that memory. And it's always as soothing as when she used to make it when we were little. And it always was very special, it's kind of I guess a Friday night special that we had, but it was always something I loved. And I remember once as a child saying, oh, I wish I were 6. So I think I was about 5. So you would make chicken soup because she always made that when we got sick. And she said, well, you don't have to be sick to have it. I'll make it for you. So I always remember that, but I like to just sort of feel her presence in the kitchen with me when I'm making that. And I do make it often because everybody likes it.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you said that because my mother didn't make chicken soup when we were sick. I mean, she probably opened soup. It's not that she didn't take care of us. For sure, she didn't make homemade chicken noodle soup, but I have always made it for my own kids. And so I really hope that someday they have that memory. You know, it's really great now to hear you say that you have that memory, because you don't really know what memories are going to stick.
Right.
Even with yourself, you know, you don't think about the things when you're a child, you don't think about the things that are going to stick, but it's sort of, there's no predicting what that's going to be.
Right.
So, you know, it's chicken soup thing is sort of just it's a metaphor for
Love. It's just love.
love.
Mother
Yes,
shows
it's just
child.
love in all different shapes and forms.
And I'm sure you, even though your mother might not have liked to cook, have wonderful memories. So if you would like to share one of your memories of your mother, even if it doesn't involve food, I think it would be nice to hear or share.
Well, her love of cooking was really her non-love of cooking translated into her love of babies. She was just an incredible, they called her the baby whisperer. She was the woman who everybody, no matter what the who the child was and whatever the problem was, my mother could always soothe the baby. And so everywhere we went, and she was always seeking out the babies too. Everywhere we went, she would go up to total strangers and offer to hold their babies. And she really just was. So when you were talking about, you know, in the context of this conversation, again, the baby that came to stay with you for the weekend, that you borrowed for the weekend to test out, I was thinking that that's something my mother would have done, except she wouldn't have wanted to give the baby back at the end.
Right.
Even if the baby screamed from Friday to Sunday, she still wouldn't have wanted to give the baby back. So
Kelly,
I think
did your mom know your kids?
she did. She just passed away. Tomorrow will be 4 years. So she actually knew my kids, and I'm pretty sure that the day I was the first to have children in my family of 3, and when my oldest daughter was born, I think was the happiest day of her life. Other than, yeah, she was really an all-in wonderful, wonderful grandmother, just as she had been. And we went through a very rough time with my third was a micro preemie, and I spent several weeks in the hospital, and then he spent 3 months in the NICU unit. And during that time, my mother stepped in and basically took my other kids and raised them, you know, kept them. And I never once worried. I missed my kids terribly, but I never worried because I knew that they were in the best place they could possibly be. And I think that it was such a wonderful time for her and them, you know, because they really, really bonded with her, and forever, like until her death, they adored her.
Yeah.
So it was great. It was really special.
That's beautiful. That is really beautiful.
I was lucky.
Yeah.
Marissa and Julia, I don't know if you're still on, and Jen and Nicole, but our mother had a practice of taking each of the 4 grandchildren when they reached the age of, you know, somewhere around 7 or 8. She would take them on a special one-on-one trip with her.
Oh, nice.
And so if any of you, any of the 4 of you are still on and want to speak to just a few moments about your trip with grandma, because I think those were really transformative times in the sense of getting to really spend special one-on-one time with grandma.
It was so special, like to be able to, I mean, when we turned 8, that was kind of what we did, because that was the first time you could fly as an unaccompanied minor. So we would, she started that tradition of letting us come visit her and doing something special with each one of us, just one-on-one. And speaking of food, she took me on a cruise ship and like a couple-day cruise off the coast of California. And there was a buffet, you know, the cruises have these huge buffets. And for anyone that knows me from when I was little, I was probably one of the pickiest eaters you could find. And so I went through this entire buffet line of countless options, just tons and tons of food. And I think I ended up with a plate of carrots and some rice. And grandma was just
Love to tell that story.
She loved to tell that story, but she was very supportive. She didn't push me to try to eat anything I didn't want to eat. She just said, all right, if that's, you know, after all of, you know, this huge buffet of countless options, what you want is carrots and some rice, go for it if that's what makes you happy. And so I think I lived on carrots, rice, and cookies for a bit. And, you know, I haven't inherited my grandma and my mom's skills for cooking, but I do feel really lucky to have such great role models when it comes to showing love and making people feel, you know, so loved and so special. So I really think that she would have loved this.
And in some ways you were smarter because you married someone who likes to cook.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that. I remember that the trip, I think when we turned 8, I went to San Diego with grandma, and I feel like she just took such special care to, set up fun things that we would like to do as kids and always have our favorite foods and, set up play dates with the grandkids of her friends. And I thought, she really just made everything so special. And I remember when I would fly into California and visit her, even if I was getting in at like 10 o'clock at night, she would have dinner ready. My favorite mac and cheese, she'd have prepped and ready so she could just put it in the oven so that we could eat together when I arrived. So I know food was obviously a big part of our family, and she would have absolutely loved this. And this is really, really fun to get to be here with you all today.
Yeah, I want to echo all of that, and thank you all so much for sharing your memories of mothers and sharing memories of our grandma. It's really special. When I was 8, we went to Yosemite, which is funny because I'm not that outdoorsy, but I guess she saw something in me. I remember this is just a random food memory, but she got these peach gummy rings that I used to really love, the kind of sour sweet ones. And we were sitting in our hotel room and reading this pamphlet about bears. And then all of a sudden she was like, oh my gosh, the peach rings. And it was pretty dark outside, but we trekked out to the car and rescued the peach rings because apparently they are at great risk of being eaten by bears, and bears will break into your car and stuff. So she was very sweet to rescue the peach rings and very adventurous.
I have a mom story and a food story. My mother just turned 94.
Oh.
But a couple of months, and our family was always major into food and eating out and going to restaurants and cooking, etc. And I took her a few months ago to the gerontologist and associated with Cedars-Sinai in Beverly Hills. And they kept taking her vitals and everything else. And then they said, you've got a big problem. We're taking you by emergency vehicle to the hospital. I wouldn't recommend that you go home. My mother says, I'm not going in an emergency vehicle, and I'm not going to the hospital. I've had a wonderful life, et cetera, et cetera. The bottom line is that we're driving down Robertson. We left the appointment, and she's looking around, and she says, wasn't there a really good ice cream place around here? And I said, Mom, if we keep your eye posted, and if we find it, we'll stop.
Did you find it?
We didn't, but
but that was precious, though, that she had that instinct. Oh,
yeah, exactly. She's on her deathbed, but she's looking for ice cream stores.
Yeah.
One, changing the subject on soups. If you don't have any of the ingredients except probably the peas, there's it's easy to substitute a million different things. So I wanted organic dill. I didn't find it. And I didn't have leeks. So easy substitute for leeks is onions and garlic. And that's what I used in my soup. I didn't have stock, and you can easily put water in. But since stock is got some rich flavor, I also added carrots to my soup, which will give it good flavor. And then I didn't have any bay leaves. I grow a bay leaf tree, but anyway, I didn't have any right now. And I used dried thyme, and I also used some fresh rosemary. So you can be pretty flexible with this soup. And
you are seriously honoring Marianne tonight, right?
Yes.
That's awesome.
It'll turn out fabulous no matter what.
And I have to interject that Andrea is a fabulous chef of great rapport in Los Angeles and catered both Susan's and my wedding many
Oh my goodness.
decades back. So she knows from whence she speaks. She's a fabulous cook in her own right. And Andrea, please tell us a bit about the work that you're doing now with the large kitchen, because I think people would be really interested in that.
Okay, I have a company called Chef's Kitchens. And basically what it is it's for startups who need a place to do their professional cooking. And it's on Robertson, as it turns out, in West Los Angeles.
That's so cool. So you're like, you get to see and smell and taste it all before like the LA Times gets to review people, right?
Right, exactly.
That's so fun.
So I can ask you my question about the dill. Are the stems totally edible? Any problem using the stems in things?
I actually would put the stems into a stock, into a vegetable stock, but if you're going to puree your soup, the stems are fine in the soup. It's just the texture some people don't like. But you can put carrot stems, you can put dill stems, you could. And I would save the really pretty part of the dill mainly for the garnish. And I would put it in at the last minute so that it doesn't, if you're going to cook it, so that it doesn't lose its beauty and flavor.
Yeah.
And Andrea, what about this part of the leek? You know, the green tough stuff.
Again, that's a little tough, but you can put it in stock.
Stock. That's what I was thinking to use. I never thought of that, but instead of just throwing it out, I should use it for vegetable stock, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, good idea. I just took it all out of the composting. I'll wash it off.
Carol, approximately how long do the split peas have to bubble away? I've covered my pots and they're bubbling.
And it's bubbling away.
Yeah.
You know, we all have different pot sizes, but I think as long, like mine are still kind of hard, but I've had my top off. So I'm going to put the top on, but I would say 15 minutes or so should do it. And let's see, what time do we have now? Yeah. So we need.
Just like pasta, have a little tasting spoon and taste a little piece.
Yeah.
Taste one and see how.
Right. No, I think mine, like Carol, are still very hard. So I just didn't know what that.
Mine are too. Yeah. I think for those of us cooking, you know, if you're cooking 24 servings, they're still going to be hard. So mine are certainly still hard too. It just takes a while. So I'm sorry, I'm just getting to these questions in the chat. Someone asked about adding salt and pepper. I'm a big fan of adding that at the end once you've done the pureeing. But yeah, I probably will add some at the end just to see. Sometimes with the dill, you won't even want any of it because it's just so flavorful without it. But if I add it, I would add it after the pureeing rather than adding it now. And then in terms of when to add the dill, I haven't added mine yet because my peas are still really, that's the last thing that I add, and my peas are still pretty hard. But once your peas start to soften, I think it's fine to add the dill. So one of our family favorite stories, if Marissa's still on, she'll remember this because I think she used it, in fact, in a college application essay. It's a food story about my mom when she was having people over for dinner and made some sort of cake for dessert that didn't quite cook correctly, and it was like mushy. And so she just decided instead of a cake, it was a compote. And so she served it in bowls and it was a compote. And that was always like a classic grandma story at our family, because it so epitomized my mom that she always knew how to make lemons from lemonade, and she always knew how to make a happy ending from a disaster. And when we were little and we'd come home from school with some sort of crisis, she would always find a way to say, well, here's, some options for how it can turn out to not be such a crisis. So hopefully no one has any crisis in their soup at the moment. But if you do, think about Marianne and you'll find a way to turn it into a delicious soup.
Yeah, she told me that I had cookies and they were very dry and like cakey sort of. And she just told me that I had made scones and they actually were really quite moist and delightful when you thought of them as scones.
So I guess I shouldn't tell you the story about when I was in 5th grade and we were Girl Scouts and we were having a guest speaker. So 2 of my friends and I got together. We may have been brownies. We were little kids. Anyway, we baked a cake that we were then going to ice. And so we poured it into a bundt pan and you expect it to rise in the oven. Well, we took this cake out and instead of rising to being, this tall or whatever, it was about this tall. So we put an equal amount of icing on top so no one would notice. Because we were kids and icing was good.
Can't go wrong with too much icing.
Carol, is there something your mom would say or a particular wisdom that stays with you? Something that you turn to or you think about, a particular comfort or wisdom or guidance, something that gives you sustenance and peace?
She had lots of expressions. I remember her talking about whether something was her cup of tea or not, and she, but I don't know, Susan, is there something that comes to mind? I mean, I guess the thing that she really imparted to us as her children was to always see not that she used this expression, but she was such an optimist. She was always looking at the bright side of things. And she always, tomorrow is another day is an expression I can remember her saying, or, things will work out. I mean, she was just always very upbeat and positive. And I down to when we were all in the doldrums after the 2016 election, and even then she found a way to say, well, we have to see how things work out, and you can't lose sight of what's good. And she just was always an optimist. So I don't know, Susan, do you have an or any of the kids on?
Yes, at all. She was sometimes, almost too optimistic. For my, I was always being accused of, not being in a great mood or seeing the disadvantages of a situation, and she was the opposite. And so, although we didn't always agree about it, I think her way of looking at the world was really a good one and helped me to become a little less like my normal instinct of thinking things aren't going to get better, or I've got to start from scratch, with something that didn't turn out right. So I did learn a lot from her.
Susan, where did that come from? Was it just her personality was that way, or did she have?
No, she actually was raised by a single mother. Joan mentioned my grandmother. My grandmother was a single child whose mother died when she was 5 and her father died when she was 15. So by the time she was 15, my grandmother was orphaned. And she ended up marrying a man she used to say was a great dancer and a good-looking guy, but during the Depression, he couldn't really find a good job that would make him feel successful. And my grandmother divorced him in 1936 or 37. at a time where women did not do that. And especially in Jewish families, it was almost unheard of. And so she basically raised my mother alone with the scorn of the family that she had on her husband's side, and she had no parents of her own. And my mother was raised therefore in the same environment, a very resilient kind of person who had no father. I mean, her father didn't want much to do with her, or had very little to do with her for most of her life. And then he actually died of a heart attack when she was still, I think, in her teens. And then when she was 17, she got a wonderful stepfather. My grandmother married again, but there was a lot of time in there where my mother was alone and raised by a nanny while her mother was working as a librarian and as a teacher. And I think she just learned to get through it herself, that if she didn't have that attitude, she would let life beat her down, and she wasn't going to have that. She didn't have that as a model. Her mother had stood up to the adversity and made it through as a success and loved life. Somebody had mentioned her mother loving babies. My grandmother loved children and always said she wanted 3 sets of twins. And every time we walked down the street, she would stop to look in the strollers and ooh and ah at the babies. So she was like your mother as well. But she only had my mother as one child. And I think that was, a disappointment to her. And my mother just learned it from her mother. It was the way you did things.
I just want to add one story about our mother growing up, because she told me this when I was little, and I thought it was such a profound thing that, as Susan said, her mother was a librarian and worked, during the day, which at that time was very unusual to have a working mother and not to have a father who lived with you, and parents divorced and all. And at some point, my mother switched from a private school in New York to the local public school, which actually, contrary to today, was much more rigorous than her private school had been. So she was really having a hard time, with homework, volumes of homework, and the change in schedule and the change in scene. It was really, really hard. And my grandmother was out, and my mother had some problem with her homework that she just couldn't figure out. And she went to bed and she left a note for her mother, our grandmother, saying, I don't understand this. I don't know what to do. It's due tomorrow. I'm so scared. I don't know what to do. And she always remembered that her mother helped her finish the assignment. What she wrote, whatever notes she wrote to her at night, my mother woke up in the morning and was able to complete the assignment. And when she told me that story, I remember I was still very, very little and thinking, yeah, that's what moms do. They protect, and they give peace and comfort. And I always, wanted to think about that role model, because it was so positive for me. My mother always was that peace and comfort for me. And I think that's not uncommon that mothers do that, but it's so wonderful when you can have a mother that gives you that comfort. So here's to comforting moms.
You're here. When you said that about mothers bringing peace, that reminds me so much. I'm like so many of you, I lost my mother a number of years ago. It was in February. So for me, that, as my sisters and I call it, the sad anniversary, was last month. But she's actually the reason why I cook. She was an inspiration in the kitchen, which is almost ironic because she grew up never cooking. And in fact, our funny family cooking story was that when she and my father met, she had never actually cooked. She was a young woman who had come here from Belgium and was living in DC. And she wanted to impress my father when they were dating. And so she made the effort to put together a menu and cook a meal in her apartment. And they sat down to eat it. And my father looked down at the table and he said, "I can't eat a bite." And she thought, oh my goodness, I've offended him. She grew up Catholic. He was an Orthodox Jew. She didn't know what she had done wrong. She knew it wasn't a meat dairy issue. And she's just, having a moment. And my father's a jokester. there was no silverware on the table. So he
Oh.
couldn't eat a bite. So that became one of our folklore, family stories. But in fact, when they did eat a bite, they decided to go out to one of their favorite restaurants instead, because apparently it really wasn't good. So, but she became an amazing, amazing cook, and, would try things that were very daring in the kitchen, really beautiful terrines and things that I've really never attempted. But she was my inspiration, certainly in life and in the kitchen. So while we're giving shout outs to good moms who gave you peace and love, got to send one up to her as well.
Great. Good to hear.
Our mom used to always say, if you can read, you can cook, which I think is true on some levels, and that, you can follow a recipe, but it sounds like a lot of our moms went well beyond that, in the sense of really developing a kind of a sense of how to be innovative and creative, which takes more than reading. But at least, I guess, to start, if you just start by reading recipes and doing what they tell you to do, that was my mom's vision for how you start to become a good cook.
Absolutely.
When we were growing up, I was the youngest of 4, and there were actually less than 5 years between my oldest sister and myself. So we were kind of, and my mother was never really designed to be a suburban housewife, ended up being a suburban housewife, and it was kind of driving her a little bit crazy with these 4 little children. So she got the Julia Child cookbook, and she used to cook for us from the Julia Child cookbook, because it was the one way that she felt she could be creative and nurturing and not part of this suburban kind of conformity life. And I don't think we quite appreciated at the time. Many years later, divorced my father and remarried, and lived in New York with a tiny one of these wonderful New York City galley kitchens. And it was amazing, what she could prepare in this very cramped spot. I always thought, and she had a very meaningful professional life, but it was when she was in the kitchen and everybody was like, all the grandkids and nieces and nephews, and even my cousins from like the divorced father side of the family, everyone's there. And she was never as happy as she was there feeding people. And I remember after she died, and she died January 31st. So we all kind of have this concentration of anniversaries. And people were bringing meals over to our house. And my younger daughter said, why are they doing that? And I said, nurturing and food and caring, this is, feeding us as a way of continuing life and sustaining life. And so even for mothers who had kind of very busy lives, sometimes the kitchen is what we connect to most, because it's a sign of nurturing and sustaining life. And so whenever I cook, I was like, what would Go-Go do? My mother's name was Gloria, but nickname was Go-Go. All the grandchildren called her Go-Go. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you for sharing Go-Go with us.
Yeah. I love
These
that.
stories are so beautiful. Thank you, Carol and Susan, and all your families on the call, and everybody else who's shared. Really heartwarming to celebrate mothers in this way. Thank you for sharing them with us.
And we didn't plan it, but I will give everybody a heads up that we have changed next Monday's recipe, and it will include an honor to a dad who I think recently has passed away. So we're gonna, if you think you already bought soup for next Monday, the ingredients, check the recipe, check the website again, because we've changed the soup, and we've got, I think some siblings are gonna lead next week too, right, Salma?
Yeah, it's 3 sisters who lost their father a year ago. So it's also a 1-year anniversary of his passing. And they just adored him, and I knew him, and I'm very close to these sisters. So he was also an amazing person who we'll get to know about. And one of the things that I loved to do for him, and which I loved that he loved, was making soup and sending it with my friend to him during his last several years when he wasn't feeling great. So making soup in his honor and sharing it will be particularly special as well.
And thank you to Lisa for her flexibility. She was going to lead us next week, and she's going to take a different date so that these sisters can honor their dad next week. Thank you, Lisa. And I think we're going to wrap it up. There were some questions about whether or not to have all the ingredients, the rest of the dill and the peas in. And I think the answer is yes. When you're ready to blend, have everything in, right, Carol? Maybe save a little bit of dill for the end. But for those of you who are freezing up soups and sharing, you're going to have to put it in at some point right at the end anyway. Everybody enjoy your soups. Does anybody have a last question about the soup before we let everyone go?
I just wanted to say thank you. I'm really honored to be a part of this, and I loved hearing your stories.
We're glad you joined us today. We hope we get to see you again soon.
Yeah, me too.
Good. We'll be on every Monday. So join us whenever you can. And
Susan and Carol, thank you
Susan.
so much. And granddaughters, thank you all for sharing. This has been really a very special night of cooking. I really appreciated it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really,
Thank
it
you.
does my heart good to be able to hear from all of you and to release the stories I have inside of me. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
For giving us the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, everybody have a wonderful week, and we'll be
You too.
Marianne and Kelly will be thinking of you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
You're
Yes.
welcome. Everybody be well. Take good care of yourselves.
Good night.
Good
Bye.
night. Bye, everyone.